Vajira, Head of Quality Assurance at Dilmah. Innovation in sustainability is a major part of what we do. We aren't just carbon neutral. We hosted the first carbon neutral event, which offset 97.17 tons of carbon emissions. That's another first in our ever evolving journey of sustainability and an example of our commitment to reduce our carbon footprint. Dilmah Tea is made with love and sustainability. From the way we handpick our teas to how we pack them and to how we go beyond that. Do try it.
Aibwan, Vanakkam, Assalamu alaikum, and a very good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on where in this beautiful globe you're joining us from today. Today marks a very special day for us here at AmCham Sri Lanka. Through the Looking Glass, brought to you in collaboration, of course, with Dilmah Tea and LSEG in Sri Lanka and supported by Pulse and the Daily FT, gives us the privilege of chatting with two incredible ladies. Today, we celebrate their success, and especially so as daughters of Mother Lanka. But more than this, we celebrate their power of perseverance, of inspiration, and of all that encompasses being a woman. Our beautiful guest, Melony Mahaarachchi, was recognized in 2018 by Melinda Gates as a tech leader, a mechanical and robotic engineer. She was a prolific for over a decade and positioned herself in the US aerospace industry as an industry tech leader, managing projects for Elon Musk's company SpaceEx, Boeing Commercial, Long Beach, and finally NASA's Jet Propulsion Lab in Pasadena. She ended this vibrant engineering career fulfilling her duties as the lead mechanical engineer for the Mars Perseverance rover, which landed on Mars just a few days ago. Melony has a bachelor's in mechanical engineering from UCLA and an MBA from the University of Cambridge Judge Business School. She is founding partner at Cambridge Global Ventures Inc. Los Angeles, which aims to fill investment gaps in ESG. And she founded the nonprofit organization iSTEM Without Borders, focusing on underprivileged students and women to pursue and thrive in STEM careers. She also mentors startups in Cambridge Cluster and SLASCOM Women Technopreneur Forum in Sri Lanka. Shanika Amarasekara was recognized for services to business and the economy by Her Royal Highness the Queen and awarded an MBE in 2020. Shanika is the Chief Impact Officer at the British Business Bank, and during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, Shanika led the successful launch of the Future Fund scheme to support innovative UK companies with good potential that typically rely on equity investment and were affected by COVID-19. Shanika has also contributed to high-profile projects outside of her work at the bank and is a non-executive director of the Queen Elizabeth Olympic Park as well as the London Stadium. She has previously been recognized for breaking down barriers at work and working hard for ethnic minorities, and was most recently listed in Empower's Top 100 Ethnic Minority Role Model list in 2019. Prior to her current role, Shanika was the General Counsel and Company Secretary of the British Business Bank, and she has worked as General Counsel at an institution established by a number of central banks to promote financial stability and economic development. Before that, Shanika has previously worked at RBS as a director in their structured finance team and at Allen & Overy. It's my absolute privilege to welcome you both, ladies, and I want to start off by thanking you, not just for taking the time to share with us and chat with us, but also for who and what you are and what that means to all women striving to achieve their dreams. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rai.
So to start off, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? Melony, would you like to start? Who is Melony Mahaarachchi?
Oh, that's me. Yeah, so currently I'm quarantining in Sri Lanka, stuck in a hotel room, but it's a beautiful sea view. So I'm sure most of you are envious of what the view I have, but I'm excited to join you guys. So I'm Melony Mahaarachchi, and I grew up in Sri Lanka. I left Sri Lanka in 2003, 17 years ago. And I went to Girls High School, Mount Lavinia, up until my O-levels, and then my mother dragged me and put me to Holy Family Convent. I have no idea why, Holy Family Convent, to do my A-levels. So I did my K through 12 in Sri Lanka. Was a banker for like 2 or 3 years. Got married. Very typical life story up until I left Sri Lanka. So, and then I got married. I have 2 kids. So when I went to, we moved to US in 2003, and then only my life changed completely. And I'm happy to talk more later on. So, and I'm the only daughter in my family, so I've always been a tomboy. Happy to talk about that as well.
Wonderful. Shanika, what about you?
Sure. Sadly, I'm not sitting in a beach resort in Sri Lanka, although I'd love to be.
Not yet.
Hopefully not yet, but that will happen soon. So, to introduce myself, I'm Shanika Amarasekara, a bit like Melony actually. So I grew up in Sri Lanka, went to St. Bridget's Convent, studied at the University of Colombo, so did well in my A-levels, went to the law faculty, also went to law college, so became an attorney at law. As sort of side projects while waiting to get into university, I worked for a time at what was then FM 99 or Capital Radio as a broadcast journalist for a bit of time. That was kind of between A-levels and starting university. Studied for my CIMA as well, because back in the day there was a long gap before you could get into university, and there was time, and I need to find a way to make sure I stayed out of trouble, because too much time on my hands at that age, and you just kind of run loose and like waste your time doing all kinds of things. So I had to keep myself busy, and so left Sri Lanka really to go to London to do my master's in law, and that was 2000. And actually the idea then was to spend some time doing my master's and then maybe work in the UK for a year or 2 and get some training, but to go back to Sri Lanka after a short period. And I'm not really sure what happened, because 21 years later, I still live in London. I guess part of it was I met my husband and got married, and then life takes different twists and you don't really know, but I still feel very connected to Sri Lanka and clearly call myself Sri Lankan, particularly when the cricket's on.
So life happens basically.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So something you both mentioned, Melony, you said tomboy, and Shanika, you said you needed to find something to keep yourself occupied between A-levels and moving on. Tell me a little bit about that. What you guys, were you imps as kids and teenagers, or studious good girls?
I'll let Shanika answer. Yeah, I'll let Shanika.
I'm definitely going into the troublemaker category, but but troublemaker while also actually somewhat enjoying studying. So I did get good grades at school. I was the head girl at school at St. Bridget's, which sounds like it's something which carries responsibility, but actually the year that I was head girl, one of the responsibilities at school was to get to school on time and ring the bell to start school, and I was never on time, so I had to delegate that to one of the other girls in school to get there on time. And in fact, I think I used the kind of authority I had as the head girl to kind of create more trouble and disrupt things than to enforce rules and laws.
I wonder if any of your teachers are watching this right now. They'll have a lot of
they will say exactly the same thing.
Melony, what about you?
Well, I was a tomboy at home because I grew up with brothers, and then all my neighbors are mostly guys. So I was tomboy at home. I was very hyperactive. I think back then in Sri Lanka, we didn't know that there's a thing called ADHD or ADD, and my mom swear by that I was an ADD or ADHD kid, very hyperactive. But somehow in school, I was not boisterous. Like I did sports and I was an athlete. So I think my character build came from me being an athlete. And I balanced. I did a lot of things, and I was always very greedy of doing things. Singing kavi and the poems and the dramas and the music, you name it, I was taking part of it. But at the same time, I did studies, but somehow I wasn't like a troublemaker. Like I was one of the good girls. I'm sorry, Shanika. But I think it doesn't matter, who you are. It's just that we all, I knew that I had to live up to my fullest potential since I was very young. I think I had two brothers, so I always just in my mind competing. My mom favored my two brothers. So I was always trying to get that attention from my mom, doing more. So that's how I was in school, but not really a troublemaker, but at home for sure.
I'm just wondering what your kids watching this are going to be thinking.
Thank God it's like really middle of the night for them and early morning. So I'm sure they are not. They are fast asleep now.
Excellent. As we keep trying to say don't do this and don't do that, and then you think back and oh my gosh, I have a heart attack every time one of my fellows climbs a tree. I'm like, oops, But then I think back and I can just imagine what my mom went through when we did the same thing.
Yeah. You were worse.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. We actually were a lot worse, I must say. Okay, that's in terms of are you talking podi kale, or tell me a little bit more in terms of your teenage years? Were you like a riot, or did you always have an idea of as you were saying, I want to live up to my full potential? Was that always at the back of your mind, or did you want to enjoy being a kid first, and then did you think at the back of your mind at some point I'll get down and get serious? So was it in tandem? Did you do both together?
Yeah, I was somehow, even now, I have, I can stretch my boundaries. I think that came from how I grew up in Sri Lanka. So I took two buses to come to school. I woke up very early, and after school I went back home and again got dressed, came back to do my sports practice. I was never tired, right? I always was very curious and I wanted to do new things. I think it's I get bored very quickly. That's what my mom always say, okay, please don't bore her. Once I stop learning, I get very bored. So that's why I got involved with sports and so many other things. So it's just that I'm a little sad that I didn't cut school and go and watch movies. Some of my friends did. Still, I'm really, good friends with them. Especially the girls. I'm very close to the girls who went to Girls High School, Mount Lenya. 10 years I went to school over there. So I regret some of those stuff. My mom was very strict. So I think mainly because of that, she would just smack me. So I wasn't a bad girl, not bad girl. I didn't do anything out of norm. But I was really enjoying my school. My mom didn't know what the heck I was doing. I go and tell, hey, tomorrow, we have the prize giving and I'm getting a prize for the kavi or, music. And then she get dressed and come. She has no clue what I was doing in school. But, I was always doing a lot of things at the same time.
There's a lot there that, reflecting on it, you're completely right. I get bored easily as well.
Yeah.
But it does mean that you try lots of things, because when you get bored easily, you're willing to try different things to see what's interesting. But it's also when something doesn't end well, being able to say, okay, this is not interesting for me, and moving on quickly is something that I did a lot as a child. And there was this constant question we used to get asked, what do you want to be when you grow up? I still don't know what I want to be when I grow up. And so I hate questions like that.
Me too. A lot of people ask me, did you ever dream of becoming an engineer, right? And then you cannot dream about things that you don't know. We didn't have those facilities, right? And the libraries and, very basic, I grew up in a very middle class family. So you cannot dream about things that, space and rocket science was not something I was introduced as a young girl. So when people ask what I want to be, I always told what my mother thought what I want to be, which is to become a doctor. And completely out of my character. I could never be a doctor. Because, recently I got the COVID injection, and I was the only one who kind of screamed getting the injection in the big hole. So, I don't know how my mom thought that I would be a doctor. So for the longest time, I told everybody what my mom's dream for myself. But I think, but I excelled in math and science. Kind of as a good indication that I'm not going to be a doctor, but maybe an engineer. But I found out later.
And similarly, I think I probably, in being asked, what do you want to do, and not knowing the answer, I think people got a bit fed up of asking me the question, and it kind of got to a point of do whatever you want. We don't know what the answer is for you. You sort it out.
Yeah.
But actually, it was interesting because I did quite well in school and got good grades in my O-levels, and there was a real push, wasn't there, that science subjects are for kids who study in other subjects. And actually, the thing that I'm most interested in is people in social sciences and understanding history and culture and the more sociological subjects. And for my A-levels, I studied accounting and economics and things like that. So I think this idea that you have to compartmentalize and know exactly what you want and go on this straight path to that end result, and that there are no twists and turns and corners to take, it's something that I reject completely. And it's kind of one of those things that, as you think about what questions you ask kids, often there are no answers to these things.
Yeah, I agree.
I guess that's something that actually kind of spreads across in terms of everything in life, because I don't know if this is going to be an unpopular opinion, but I think that's something that you see a lot. Even in terms of marriages, right? I, as a woman, found that I maybe understood who I am and what I want from life, from career, from family, from all of that only after I was 30. That's kind of when I started understanding myself. So, you rush into a career, or you rush into a profession, or you rush into a marriage, or whatever, before you even know yourself. And that's, I suppose, how you end up being unhappy and unsatisfied in what you're doing, and then not being productive. And so I guess it's interesting that you need to first know yourself before you can jump into these stereotypical things that you're supposed to do because mom or dad or tradition dictates that you should.
Yeah, and I don't think that's unpopular, actually, right? I think that's completely right. And actually, I think you asked kind of what we were like as kids, and it was certainly one of the things that I was doing as a kid was really pushing those boundaries, like testing. So if I was told I couldn't do something, that's exactly what I wanted to do. And it wasn't necessarily from competitiveness, but it's because someone told me I couldn't do something.
Yeah. Me too. I found out that I'm that stubborn during my career. When somebody tells me, I went to my engineering, university, and then my first job, I had kids. So I was working at SpaceX, and there everybody, all the engineers were 28 and under. And here this 30-plus-year-old mom going with 2 kids and a startup, and you work 17-hour days. There were times people told me like, you can't do it because this. And then it just like proving to myself that I'm just like anybody else. It's constantly. I think that happened during later years in my career. But as a mother, I do exactly opposite of my mom did. My mom got her inspiration from her mom. So she has 5 sisters and 3 brothers. So she looked at how her mom raised her kids, and that she just kind of found, okay, you're smart, maybe you should be a doctor. It's a good thing for a girl to become a doctor and so forth, right? But that is exactly opposite I'm doing to my daughter. I really wanted both my kids to be in STEM, but my daughter, first year itself, she went as a chemistry major, and she changed the major without me telling. Now she's a economics major. And I told her, it's okay, you don't have to consult me, but when you make that decision, you have to stick with the decision. No studies is going to be easy. So when you make decisions, you have to stick with it. I think that is something I'm so differently doing from what my mom did. Yeah.
I guess it's the same with all of us. We I don't know, maybe the generations before us followed what their prior generations did, and now we're doing the exact opposite of it. I think I'm definitely doing exactly that. I do a complete opposite of what my parenting was in how I managed my kids. Interesting. So when did you decide that you wanted to, that engineering was not boring? Let's put it that way. When did that happen? When did that aha moment happen?
Yeah. So when we went to US in 2003, our kids were 2.5 and 4 years, 4.5. So like any other immigrants, we thought, more than the kids, we want to go to Washington, D.C., just like see where all America started. What is America? We just wanted to go to Washington, D.C. So we took the kids to D.C., and I know we were dragging our little kids around and just like showing they had no clue what they were seeing, but they were very interested in this Smithsonian Space Museum. So we went there. That was in 2004. We watched a half-an-hour documentary about rover that was landed in 2004. And that was like a 20-30 minutes documentary. And then I remember the whole thing. And my jaw dropped while watching these scientists talking about their work. And then I picture myself in that little documentary talking about work. So all of a sudden this became like I'm in that dream. And then once the documentary was over, everybody stood up and started clapping. So it was such a patriotic moment for the US because, they put this very sophisticated rover in 2004. So that's when I thought, okay, this is such a patriotic thing. And people just, idolize the scientists and engineers who are doing this breakthrough, innovative, robotic projects. I want to one day, be in the mass program. So that's how it's all started. But it took me like a good 10 years to go to university, graduate, start with the startup, and just like kick myself way through all this experience to get to NASA. But I did. So I think that's where it started. I thought that trip was to inspire the children. And then in return, I got inspired to kind of find my, that was my aha moment. So
Melony, would you say that that's that engineering or aeronautical and mechanical engineering is your first love now, or have you now got bored and moved on?
No, to be honest, I really, if I didn't become an engineer, if somebody asked me that question, I would say hands down a hairdresser, a beautician and a hairdresser. Trust me, I am qualified by Janet Balasurya to do the hair and makeup, and I have dressed some of my friends for their wedding. It's just something, it's very artistic, very empowering, and making somebody look good and making them happy. So I did it for myself because I got a free haircut from my brother's barber growing up until like in my teenage years. So everybody thought I'm a boy too. So I really wanted to look like a girl. So when I was like older, I went to this personal care course, and then I ended up taking a full course that I can open a salon. So yeah, so it's two different, but it's very artistic. Both careers are very artistic. So I have a lot of hairdressers and beauticians in US who are my friends.
Brilliant, like super interesting, I must say. Shanika, what about you? What was your aha moment?
So I think there was less of a moment actually, but it was an incremental creep, because I think for me it was whatever I did. So I had a dread, I think, when I was kind of in my late teens, early 20s, and the recurring nightmare I had is that I had to get up, get dressed, and go to work every day and sit at a desk. This was genuinely a nightmare, and so I delayed starting like a proper job, as people called it, a proper job, for as long as I could, by doing things like working at a radio station, going to do my master's. But then actually I realized, as I was doing all these different things, that it is possible to do work that isn't waking up at 9 o'clock, going and sitting at a desk and shuffling papers around, because in my head that would be the most boring thing in existence ever. But as I continue to do all these different things, I realize that actually in those papers there are problems that I enjoy solving. And it's not just sitting at a desk reading papers, it's interactions with people. It's kind of how do you take problem solving in a complex environment, and what do different people want from that, and how do you make sure that you're bringing consensus amongst people who actually want very different things. So things that I found incrementally was that actually difficult problems which no one wanted to solve were things that I really enjoyed. So it goes back to this idea of when someone says no to something, I really want to get stuck in and find a way to make that a yes. And so the law was a way for me to do that, because it is problem solving, and it's where there's been conflict and people disagreeing. So an opportunity to be able to kind of bring that negotiation together. So this was less of a moment for me and more incremental. And the areas of law that I started working in when I first started working in London were not the kind of easy ones. They were really the complex, multi-dimensional, 7 or 8 different jurisdictions at the same time, with about 20 parties around the table. And I just found that fun and interesting. And so I carried on doing that.
So something that I was really keen to ask you, I saw this on your LinkedIn feed maybe a week or so ago. Chief Impact Officer. Tell us, share your thoughts on the
title.
Yeah.
Right. So
I saw some interesting stuff on the post, so I want to share.
Well, and it's one of those things where in my career, what I tend to do is, rather than analyze too much what the path is that this takes me to, I find interesting stuff to do that I enjoy doing and then do it really well. So it's not really calculated as to where will this take me. Is it interesting for me? Does this make me want to get up and go to work? And does it resonate with what my values are and what I want to do with people? So I've worked as a lawyer, I've worked as an investment banker, I sit around a board table. And so I've worked at the British Business Bank now, which is the UK government economic development bank to help businesses. And I've worked there for 6 years, and there was a change in leadership. There was a new CEO, who's a friend of mine, who's the CEO now. And so her question to me was, there's much more you could be doing than just being the head of legal. And what things would you want to do? You lay out what things you'd want to do and then create a role for yourself and we'll build it around you. Which is, it's a bit intimidating, isn't it? Because someone's saying, the world is your oyster, create the role yourself. So I thought about what are the things that I'm interested in and what could I bring to that? And the things that I was interested in are things around strategy and public affairs and sustainability and ESG. But actually the thing that I was most interested in was outcomes and impact. So all of those things come together, but if you're focused narrowly on just technical delivery and you're not thinking about the so what's the outcome you want, what's the impact you want to have on people and on the planet and in society around you, I didn't feel like it was worthwhile or that I wanted to commit to that. So I said, well, let me think about what the job involves, but if I can have a title which involves having impact around me, then that's the title I'd like to have, and let me create the job around that.
That sounds awesome, and I hope it's something that, as I was telling you guys earlier, the whole, my whole thought behind this was that this would be an inspiring conversation, and I'm telling you, that's one that we're going to be seeing a lot of takeaway on, Chief Impact Officer, and the role that you play or you can play as a Chief Impact Officer. That's pretty awesome.
Actually, right now I'm learning the ESG. What I'm learning or I cannot do properly is quantifying the impact. Maybe Shanika and I will be good friends. And, I don't know I'm still learning how to quantify the impact. Shanika might be able to help me.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because if you think about ourselves as human beings having an impact around us, like we are impacting things every day, all the time, but we seek data to try and say that that's positive or negative. And so you do need to find ways to create data and evidence around it.
Yeah. So ladies, I'm going to get a bit, what's the word? I'm not sure if it's politically correct or politically incorrect, but I'm going to get a bit deep right now. And I want to ask you something that I found in my life, I'm sure you found in your life, and I'm sure that it's something that everybody finds around them. Stereotyping. The stereotyping that we are all subjected to. As males, as females, as Sri Lankans, as caste, color, creed, all of it that always makes such an impact, and the stereotyping that happens. I want you to share with me your candid thoughts, how it has impacted your life, especially where you are. You're both in very senior places in a predominantly Caucasian country. How has it impacted your life? You're also very senior places in a predominantly male world. How has that impacted your life? Your thoughts?
Shanika, you want to go ahead?
Thanks. Right. So, look, there's no point denying the existence of stereotypes, and actually, it's human nature, because we are still all programmed to want to work with people that, or connect with people that have similar backgrounds, similar thought processes. Think the same way, because in our minds that is a safe place, that's our tribe, right? So you kind of try and build a tribe around you as human nature, but that then prevents the inclusivity of society as well. So I have certainly been subjected to situations where in a very male-dominated world, being an ethnic minority woman in in banking, in senior in law firms, in government in the UK. I think one of the things that I embrace as kind of catalyzing change in this space, those that you've got to be positive around it. You can't deny it. It is life. It is a fact. And there's no point, there is no point saying that that's my lot in life, I can't change it. You have to approach this with kind of positivity and a willingness to change it, but without being aggressive, and also understanding that people's perspectives are informed by their experiences and their backgrounds, and what they've learned is based on the experiences that they've gone through, and your experiences are different. So you will all be different, and different people's experiences will presuppose what their stereotypes are. And we're all guilty. There's no point me saying I don't have my own biases and I don't create stereotypes myself. So we're all subjected to it. We all subject other people to it. And I've never treated it like a disadvantage. I've treated it like a fact. And if I find myself being subject to being disadvantaged because of things like Melony saying, oh, you didn't grow up in the UK. I mean, when you hear people saying things like you speak very good English, it's that kind of comment of, well, yeah, maybe I do. It's my second language. That's a good thing. It means I can learn a second language and learn it well. I don't take that as a criticism. I take that as a compliment.
Very true. Melony, your thought?
Yeah, so I echo the same thing Shanika is saying, and especially in aerospace industry in US, it's just it's predominantly Caucasian old men, and then me and a few other women going into the industry. They, first of all, we have to, I switched 3 or 4 jobs. Every time I had to prove myself. Like, even though I had, by the time I went to NASA, I had a very decorated resume, but that resume was just to get the job offer. But from the very first day, I had to prove myself. That became a norm, just like Shanika says, you cannot take it as a negative thing. And I only see, I look at that as a very empathetic way. When you lack strong women in your life, people are unfamiliar with what we are capable of, what the colored women or the women who are predominantly male dominant industry, they are unfamiliar. So that's something I learned over the years, to be very empathetic and approach it in a very diplomatic way. At the same time, my personality is also not very aggressive. I speak very slow, and not like, I don't come across this leader kind of thing. So the disadvantage with that is I get dragged into projects because people think I can be easily maneuvered because I look like a weak character. But the moment they started working with me, it flips the switch, and people get upset. So it's because they stereotype me. Oh, I'm innocent, it's easy, I can get her to do a lot of work, but it's not the case. I take charge, right? So I think that it's funny sometimes to me, like how people misunderstand you, the way you look. I go with, sometimes texts to other cities, like, when I was for an example, working at SpaceX, and we were doing this secret project. We were designing the landing system, which all the rockets are landing now at SpaceX, but this was the very first one, so it was very secretive. So I went from Los Angeles to Texas, and I took 3 or 4 of my technicians with me. And we had to do some work in very high altitude of this rocket. And all 3 technicians were afraid of heights, which I did not check. So I climbed, putting the harness, and I climbed hundreds of feet up. And then these guys were telling me what's in the computer and what I had to do. So everybody in that site thought I'm the technician coming with the 3 engineers, right? And then so whenever I go around, even though people who have not seen me working, they immediately look at my technicians and start talking all the engineering language and completely ignore me. So it's just very it's just because of the industry. So I don't see myself differently. So that's what I tell a lot of the women: stop seeing yourself differently. So then you see all the red flags, right? Just don't see yourself different. And if the red flags are really bright red, then you need to step up and, kind of address that. But it'll be some time, the stereotype that we have to deal with it. But I deal it with lot of empathy.
I would completely echo that, Melony. It's not worth sitting and dwelling on the negatives.
Yeah, exactly.
So we have a couple of questions coming from the audience based on what you guys were just saying. And I also want to take this moment to remind our audience that you can post your questions both here, or if you're on Zoom with us, then you can post your questions in the Q&A box. If you're joining us on Facebook, you can go ahead and post your questions on the Facebook page as well, and I will take them up. Shanika, interesting one. What's your advice to a 27-year-old rebel? Do you think it's possible to break the boundaries in Sri Lanka?
Absolutely, you can break boundaries anywhere.
There you go. So, I mean, there's not much more context. You've just said 27-year-old rebel, but if you give us a little more context, maybe we can go into detail. But
well,
yeah.
shall I build on some thinking there, though, then, which is boundaries exist everywhere. And it's one of the things I've realized as you get more senior and you work. I work very closely with senior ministers and in government in the UK, and people are people. And it really doesn't matter what the cultural context is. It's all human beings. And if you treat people with empathy and try and understand other people's context, actually those boundaries tend to disappear as well.
Okay, that's an interesting point of view. And we have another one, which is to both you ladies. In your point of view, what are the biggest challenges that Sri Lankan women face today? If you can give some context on this, and what would be your insights for them to overcome those challenges? Now, I have to add a disclaimer here before we even take the question up. Both these ladies have not lived in Sri Lanka for close upon or around about 2 decades. So, but with your context and, what would you like to say?
So, I know I thought about this very question for some time, and I first look at, do they have the opportunities, do they have the drive, right? So I look at all the list of things that could address. The number one thing that I see is the safe environment for women. I feel like environment for women, especially working women, for them to be, transporting from home to wherever your workplace or wherever you live, the safety and live, outside in the public to, live in respect, live freely and do whatever they want is something, is a big challenge for them. And I come to Sri Lanka, I don't want to, I love Sri Lanka. I come to Sri Lanka, all my brothers and my parents are here. Sometimes I come 2 to 3 times a year. Over the years, I have seen, when I grew up, it was safe for me. I took the bus a couple of times a day. It was very safe for me. My mom picked me up from the bus stand and we walked home. But my mom never kind of bothered to put me in a private vehicle and shuttle me back and forth. But now it's not the case. And I used to wear my divider skirt and shorts and go for practices in the bus, and I never felt unsafe. I think now there's a lot of unsafeness in Sri Lanka. So we can tell women, you can be whatever you want, you can do whatever you want. But that's not the case, because we need to have set that environment for them to feel safe to do whatever they want. So I think that's the biggest challenge that we need to address. We need to address that with policy changes, and we need to address that women should be safe to go to the police or to the law. Law should be refined and written for the safety of the people. So that they can be protected. So I think that's the biggest challenge in my mind women have right now.
I can't say anything. Melanie said that so well, I'm not going to add anything to that.
Okay. Another one. How are you? Okay, how do you both stay in touch with your? How do you keep your connections with your native country, Sri Lanka? And are you doing any work that is helping to bring back some of your experience and knowledge, or to help build capacity and contribute here in Sri Lanka?
Can I go first?
Go ahead.
Okay. So to be honest, I visited Sri Lanka every year because my parents and brothers are here, a lot of friends. You know, my husband tell me, he asked me, how do you define home? And I thought this like, okay, it might be US because now we live there. He said, home is where you know well and you are known well. So I thought, how brilliant that is. And when I think about from that context, I am known well in Sri Lanka and I know well in Sri Lanka. So Sri Lanka is home for me. For the last 17 or maybe 15, 16 years, I was busy taking care of really shaping the way and future for my children. And it was a very selfish kind of path that I took. We moved to US because of their education. So, my career is a side, like a consolation prize. We didn't go for my career or my husband's career. We are doing well, but we went because of the children. So we didn't take our eyes off the prize. Our prize is our 2 children. So when my daughter went to college in 2018, that's when I fully looked at how I can be impacting and work more with Sri Lanka. So, through my nonprofit STEM, I work with some of the schools, and I right now working with some of the government officials to bring back a lot of computer equipment back to Sri Lanka and give it to rural areas. So I'm doing things a lot of in a very small scale. With my new endeavor, that's why I'm here for 2 months. I really want to kind of make a difference here. Give small business, enterprises a platform. US market is a big market, and what a better way for me to impact by giving people who deserve that platform. So in the future, starting this year, I will be involved more with Sri Lanka, but up until 2018, I was first and foremost was a mother, and then was the engineer, wife, everything else. But I think that the roles kind of going to shift from this year.
Yeah, so if I answer that, something you say there echoes, Melanie, in terms of saying, I too have probably been living, as you said, a selfish life where you kind of get your head down and you focus on day to day and you're busy looking at what's around you in the immediate vicinity. But like you, Sri Lanka feels very much home. I have a WhatsApp group with all my batch from school. There's like 70 people on a WhatsApp group. There's over 1,000 messages every day, and it's about what's going on in Sri Lanka, what's the lay of the land, what are schools like, what are people doing with homeschooling, what's changing in politics and in business. So I feel very connected to what's going on the ground through all the connections, and my parents live there. So I'm back in Sri Lanka at least once a year, if not more. My husband's Indian, so we spend a lot of time in South Asia generally. And so to some extent, I think it's been a selfish existence, but I'm very keen to find ways to do more. I haven't probably gone as far as you have, Melanie, in thinking about what that could look like, but I am very interested to know how I could use what I've done and what I've learned to use the word greater impact for Sri Lanka.
Yeah, definitely.
What would you say are Okay, so something that you mentioned about, you were saying that till 2018, you were first a mother, then an engineer, then a wife, no less. So I wanted to throw to you the question about all the various roles that a woman plays. You're not just a professional, you're not just, a parent, you're encompassing all of this. And especially when you're a working woman, when you're a woman who's pursuing a career, also something as maybe as intense as what and impactful as what you guys have been doing. How do you balance the roles? And how important would you say your support network is in getting you where you need to go?
Absolutely. So that's a really good question. So I know I get asked that all the time. I think the best answer is you cannot do it all. So I have become so good in picking and choosing what's important. I have learned to say no. When I grew up in Sri Lanka, that's our culture. We don't say no. We try to please everybody. I think I had that personality when I went to college, and that I got overwhelmed because I started tutoring my peers and I didn't have enough time to study for myself. And then I realized, that comes with something else, sacrifice, right? So you have to understand what's important to you. So and to say no, and to pick and choose and prioritize what's important. It could be for that week or that month. You have to balance. Number two is I created always a very good support network. So I don't have any family over there. When we moved to our new house, we knew that's going to be our long-term house. It's like a 15 homes in the vicinity. And I realized, that's the American culture that people just don't go and chit chat. Some of the neighbors, my left side neighbor and the right side neighbor, has not spoken to 3 years to each other. And we changed that. We had barbecues, street barbecues. We started cooking. Our strength is our cuisine. People are curious when we say Sri Lankan. And the cuisine is our strength. So we use that cuisine, and I can cook very well. My husband's mother made sure that I learned cooking so that the husband can be fed very well, the son. So I can cook. So during the weekends, I cook. I have these little, get-togethers, and sometimes I send food to my neighbors. So that bond I created was my support system. So whenever I cannot pick my children up, they never stayed in a daycare. So we pick them on time, either my husband or I come, and I had always had my neighbors helping. Sometimes they take my children and feed them and so forth. So I think it's very important you have the support network. In Sri Lanka, it's different. So you have the domestic help, you have the grandparents, the aunts and uncles. Go ahead and use them. I don't look down on people who have, servants and, domestic help. In US, you have to be a millionaire to afford a, domestic help. So we don't. We did everything, but use your support network. And number three, what I do, when I chose jobs or projects or my directors or managers, I chose whom I'm reporting to. That's very important. Sometimes for the love of your job, you take a job, but your manager can be a total, bad person, who doesn't, understand your lifestyle. So later on in my careers, more than the project, I looked up to whom I'm going to report to and whom I'm going to work for. So that was very important. So he or she knows that I'm a mother. There'll be days that I need early, working from home, and find a partner, a man or a woman. Find somebody who is going to support you for your career. When you have this demanding career, the first I think the first friction comes from your husband or your wife. right? So they are the ones who get first impacted, then the children. So I just, my husband was always, I started dating him when I was 17. So don't do it, but I got lucky. And, I found men, who supported me, whatever I wanted to do. So I think he's my biggest cheerleader. So that really helped me to kind of balance my demanding career, because he always kind of took what was, overflowing in my plate, and he just kind of addressed it. So I think those are the factors that I really kind of how I manage my demanding career.
I'm gonna, lots of similar things there, Melony, but I'm gonna go back a little bit to what you said as well, Rai, which is know yourself. Because you said kind of, it's only when you get to a certain point that you feel like you discover who you are. I think it's really important that, and someone's asked, I can see, what advice would you give to the next generation of women? And this idea of interrogating who you are and what matters to you, and get to know yourself, and don't feel like you need to be dictated to by what other people think you should be, whether that's your mom or your friends or society around you. Because if you know who you are and what you want and what you stand for, then actually those ideas of what are you going to prioritize, where are the boundaries, what are you saying yes and no to, become just easier. You have clarity. So because otherwise, completely like you said, Melony, we're all taught that in general, like when we were growing up, it was like women are supposed to be a certain way, girls should say yes, we should play nicely and be sweet to everyone and be respectful, and that's how you should be. And you don't actually have to rebel against that, but if you know who you are and actually what's important to you, those boundaries of saying no to people, you're not doing it, you've not left it so late that you feel like you're letting someone down when you say no. You are right from the start saying, it's something, it's little things, right? Whenever I'm going to Sri Lanka, I always have Sri Lankan friends in London who say, please, can you take something for me? Please, can you bring something for a friend? Right, but I am chaotic and a nightmare, and so we'll always leave it behind. I won't be able to say no to that. So very early on, I learned to tell people I am really disorganized when it comes to packing. I'll be packing the day before. If you want to take the risk of giving me the parcel or asking me to get something with the knowledge that it may not get to the other end, that's fine, but you should know that that's unlikely to happen. It's your risk.
But that's also such a what's the word? Typical Asian issue, I think. Always sending something back in someone's suitcase. How would you both say your school life impacted who you are and what you've become today?
Shall I go first, Melony?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
So actually in a big way, because the things that you learn at school, the friends that you make, the experiences that you have in that group. So I had the benefit of being in one school all the way through in terms of going to St. Bridget's. And there were certain values of how you had to do things in school. Your uniform had to always be below the knee, and if your uniform looked short, you would be asked to kneel on the ground and see if your uniform was touching the ground, and if it wasn't, you had to let your hem out and walk around all day with a loose hem. But those types of things, and then
we have newspaper pasted at the bottom of the dress.
Exactly. So those kinds of experiences do teach you, and just experiences of actually growing up together. So going to an all-girls school is a very different experience than going to a mixed school, and those kinds of experiences and what you take through, I carry with me throughout my life. Actually, they've heavily influenced and informed how I behave and what my values are, and how I treat friendships, and how I connect with people, and how I think networking is important, empathy is important, compassion is important.
And audience, please note that none of this had anything to do with her being the head prefect. Melony, what about you?
Yeah, I think, I give a lot of credit to Girls High School. 2 reasons. It's not like a flashy A-grade Colombo school. Uh, and I spent 10 years of my 12 or 13 years of, as a student in girls' high school. So I think girls' high school, really gave me the base for who I am. I did a lot of sports. So I think my athleticism is the one which give me this endurance right now, right? I'm in my late 40s. I have a 23-year-old and a 21. My daughter is going to be 21 in a couple of weeks. But then the endurance coming from doing sports and can-do attitude and shoulder to shoulder, competing, that competition, that comes from doing sports. And then I did a lot of drama. I don't know why. I'm usually a shy person, but I think I push my boundaries forward. And I did a lot of drama. That stage presence gave me this courage to stand in front of 20, 30 men. Sometimes, especially at NASA, when I give my, design reviews, there are like 20, 25, most of the time, just one woman in the audience and then, 24 men. And being able to defend my, ideas, defend my work, that stage presence that I got from doing drama kind of really helped me. So I think it's and just maybe memorizing. In Sri Lankan schools, we have this exam year end, so we memorize a lot. In US, now that my children went through school, I know the school system. They less memorize and they learn fundamentals, and then the application and the creativity is very much embedded into their education system. We memorize a lot, but when I look back, I went to college in US, so I had both worlds. So it was very helpful for me to have this very sharp memory, because I was so good in memorizing things back in school. A lot of people have this cheat sheet, they have notebooks, and I just like blurb up things because I knew how to memorize things. So I think that gave me a lot of head start. Just kind of people thought I'm really, really smart, but I memorized a lot. But I think that really helped me. So yeah, whatever I did in school, especially building my soft skills and my personality to rally up people. And I was a prefect, and I was not the head girl. That's one of the reasons my mom took me from girls' high school and put me to Holy Family, because the principal said my last name is a Tamil last name, and she is not going to make me a head girl because I have a Tamil mix in my birth certificate. So my mom got very angry over that, and she took me from girls' high school and put me to Holy Family Convent. So I think, so those experiences kind of build who I am, my values, and I never stopped being a Sri Lankan. I have good values that I acquired as an American, but most of my base came from my girls' high school experience.
That's interesting. So yeah, I guess school does play a huge role in who we become later on as mothers, as professionals in whatever we do, how we maintain our relationships, our friendships, all of that. I think it does play a huge role. And also sometimes, the little things like climbing up the mango tree and hoping that the teacher passing below doesn't see you, or the mango doesn't fall on our head when you're supposed to be in class. I think we've all had experiences like that as well, which are some of the things I think that have completely grounded and rounded us as human beings. Wouldn't you agree? So there's another interesting question for Melony. Melony, what is the engineering education path that you followed in the USA? And this one is to both of you. How can opportunities be introduced in Sri Lanka for anyone who realizes later in life that their chosen path is not the path to reach their full potential?
So what was the question for me? What I studied in US. So I studied here bioscience to become a doctor. I didn't end up not going to the medical school because I wasn't good enough. But when I went to US, I had that opportunity. So I studied mechanical engineering. But mechanical engineering is a very vast subject. So your last year, you can narrow it down to whatever the industry that you want to focus on, either energy, aerospace, and, or software. You can really mechanical. I mean, you cannot really be a full mechanical engineer because like what do you do with like a just mechanical part? It has to either move, do something, right? So a mechanical engineer, they allow you to combine it with some industry. So I chose aerospace industry, obviously, because of my, little teledrama that I saw in Washington, D.C. So my last year, I focused more on aerospace engineering and design. As I say, I was a hairdresser, and so I can close my eyes and picture how somebody can look so perfect. So I think that ability, I thought I'll take it to the aerospace industry because, there were new up and coming innovative startups. So I focused aerospace industry. So then later on, like 9 years after, I went to Cambridge and got my MBA because I realized I am so technical. I don't know how to even market myself. Like I always played down. And so I realized if I want to do something, first I have to learn how to market myself and before marketing other people. So I think that MBA gave me that, breadth of knowledge. So yeah, first I did my mechanical and then the MBA. And what was the...
Shall I start on the second question and
yes,
maybe... and I think the question is what happens if you want to change your path mid-flight and what are the opportunities in Sri Lanka? I've changed my path mid-flight from doing one role. I think part of the point is not to stereotype yourself. Already society is going to be stereotyping you, and if you also put yourself in that box and say, I've been working as a lawyer for about 5 years before I decided to stop being a lawyer and take on a role being a banker. And then I decided that I wasn't going to be a lawyer. An opportunity presented itself to be the general counsel at a multilateral development bank. And if I wanted the opportunity, I needed to put myself back in a stereotype that I'd rejected for myself. And actually, I realized that I was drawing too many boundaries around myself. And everyone else is already going to do that. So if you want to change paths, think about what skills you have that can be amplified to do something other than what you do right now. And everyone has something you've learned that isn't technical. So if you've trained, in fact, some great inspiring role models I've seen was there was a lady in a law firm in London who I used to work with, who was one of the partners, and she was great. And I just thought she's so clever. And actually, she thinks about things very differently to a lawyer. It's only when I knew her for about a year that I realized she'd been a consultant doctor for 10 years before deciding to change completely and become a lawyer instead. And she excelled at that as well. But you shouldn't think there is a point at which you can't change your path yourself. But do think about what the skills are that you have that are transferable and pitch those skills. Like Melony said, a lot of this is about being able to tell the story as to why what you do now can be transferred into doing something completely different, and you have to learn to sell that to people.
Yeah, absolutely. I echo that a lot, what Shanika is saying. For me, even my first career, I embarked in my 30s, and I knew that I lost a lot of time, so I had to make up for time, and that I at the beginning looked over my shoulder and I was amazed by how smart my fellow young engineers were, because they grew up in these big computers and so forth. I didn't have even a calculator. So it just that my start was so behind. When I learned Excel, I was learning Excel and C++ at the same time. It's just, my children cannot even believe, how I had to accelerate. So, but the thing is, we never, we don't put a lot of faith into our experiences. So people talk, I'm old, I cannot change it. I might as well do what I'm doing. It's just, if you want to change, just like Shanika says, look at what are the transferable skills. What do you like to do? What you enjoy most. And I know most of the Sri Lankans live for other people, what they perceive you to do, right? And a lot of people ask me why I left NASA. It's such a glorified job. Why you left NASA? You could, I could retire at NASA, but I felt I didn't want people to glorify my career. Once I designed Mars rover, I think that was my dream and goal. And then I can close my eyes and do whatever I did at NASA, and I can do it till I'm 65, and it's such an easy job. Every other Friday was an off Friday. It's a long weekend. A lot of my other friends who are in the industry was very envious of the job that I had. But when you have to be curious, you have to challenge yourself. And I felt like once I hit the height of my engineering career, I am no longer challenging myself, and I became less curious because it's the same thing I'm going to do. So, that's why, in my late 40s, I went to get my MBA, and all my peers were in early 20s or late 20s. That doesn't bother me. Like my age, who I am, absolutely do not bother me. I think you have to live a life that not perceived by other people. Because you have only one life. You just live it to the fullest, and you at least try. You fail by trying. At least you try. So that's my mantra.
Brilliant. So I was actually going to ask you, as your last question, I was going to ask you both, because we're kind of running out of time here, and I know you guys have a hard stop as well. I was going to ask, what is your mantra? What is the creed? What is the Melony Mahaarachchi creed? What is the Shanika Amarasekara creed?
For me, it's just like I say, I really don't want to look back and regret. And I realize right now I'm at a point, I did my service to the aerospace industry, but more and more I travel, I realize there's so much I can do in this world. And I think I have the platform to do it, I have the knowledge to do it, I have the network to do it. So I don't think I will ever retire, not even at 65. I will keep working, because just like the ADD person, I'm still ADD. So I think my mantra is just, I don't want to regret living my life. So I'm going to keep on challenging myself, travel the world, have an impact, and satisfy myself.
Love it. So I would say, discover your core values, know what resonates with you in terms of your true values, and then live by them unapologetically.
Beautiful. I have to say, ladies, I've spent a very inspiring hour and something with you. Thank you so much. I know you've had to juggle a lot of things to make this time for us, especially from all corners. Shanika, you were saying you've actually been traveling in the last several months as well, and even now you're out of home base. Melony, you're sitting in quarantine, of course in sunny Sri Lanka, fortunately, but still in quarantine somewhere. And that may not have been the case as well. We weren't really sure where you were going to be, that you were going to do this chat from. So thank you for taking the time, for sharing your insights, for being so inspiring in what you've shared, and just for being you. and unapologetically so. Thank you to all of our viewers, both on Zoom and on Facebook. Thank you for sharing your questions and for being interactive in this discussion and making it what it has been today. Thank you to our partners, Dilmah Tea LSEG in Sri Lanka, and of course Pulse and the Daily of Tea. On behalf of AmCham Sri Lanka, stay safe, stay happy and healthy, continue to be unapologetically you. Good night, or wherever you are. So good day and God bless. Thanks everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
When we choose to challenge, we choose to change. Stereotypes, gender bias, social stigma, and collective perception. A challenged world is an alert world. So let's all choose to challenge and help forge a more equal world.